Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington Realtors legal hotline lawyer, and I'd like to welcome you to our new video series entitled DB's Wishlist. You can be certain every topic we cover in this series is going to be timely and pertain to what's happening in the industry right now, because every topic will be presented by one of our member designated brokers. Let's get to that first question.
Hi, CAMI Leonard with Keller Williams, Yakima Valley. My question is, what should a listing broker tell the seller when, after a mutual agreement, the seller has a change of heart and decides they no longer want to sell their home? We know if a buyer breaches the contract, they forfeit their earnest money, or the seller has an election of remedies. But what are the consequences to the seller if the seller breaches and refuses to sell the property? Thank you.
Thanks for that good question, Cami. Short answer is, listing broker, you need to advise a seller to seek legal counsel. Just because there's no forfeiture of earnest money provision that applies to a seller's breach of contract doesn't mean that the buyer is without remedy. To the contrary, buyer has every remedy available under Washington law against this seller. And that would include the ability to file a lawsuit against seller seeking damages if buyer suffered actual monetary damages by being unable to complete the purchase, sue for specific performance, meaning the right to force seller to close the transaction. If buyer sues for specific performance, buyer could also file a lis pendens against title to seller's property, meaning that seller effectively would be unable to sell the property or probably even refinance it while the lis pendens is in place. Buyer would have a claim for attorney fees. And on top of all of that, both of the real estate firms involved in the transaction would have a claim for compensation. Seller has enormous exposure if seller breaches the purchase and sale agreement. So the first question any seller is going to have answered is, am I in breach of contract if I terminate this agreement? Again, only seller's lawyer can tell them that in most cases. So if seller wants to terminate and you don't see an obvious opportunity for seller to do that under the statewide forms, get that seller to legal counsel immediately. Let seller's lawyer advise them as to their opportunity for termination and their exposure if they breach the contract. So when might seller be able to lawfully terminate a contract? If buyer's earnest money is due but not yet paid, seller can lawfully terminate the purchase and sale agreement. We have a statewide form for that. It's one of the forms in the Form 90 series. If buyer has a financing contingency still in place, a Form 22A financing contingency, seller has the opportunity under paragraph 3 to give notice of right to terminate to buyer once the proper timelines have passed. And depending on buyer's reaction, seller may be able to terminate that contract lawfully. We have other videos and articles, lots of information about paragraph 3 of Form 22A. I'm not going to go into great detail now about how that form functions. But if you're, as a listing broker, not familiar with it, get familiar with it. If your seller wants to terminate the agreement, that may be one opportunity for them to do that. Form 22EF, the evidence of funds addendum. If that addendum is in the transaction, seller may have the opportunity to lawfully terminate the agreement. Buyer is obligated to provide proof that buyer has acquired any contingent funds identified in Form 22EF. If buyer fails to timely do that, seller has the opportunity to terminate the transaction. Make sure you're familiar with the statewide forms so that you know whether or not there is a lawful opportunity for your seller to terminate the purchase and sale agreement, and you can walk them through those provisions if those are appropriate in your transaction. If not, and your seller wants out of the agreement, get them to legal counsel. Only their lawyer can give them the advice they need. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member. If you have questions on this topic or any other, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org.